is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Hello and welcome to The World Today, live from CGTN in London. I'm Robin Dwyer. Our top stories. The Afghan president flees the capital as the Taliban reaches Kabul, surrounding the city. Nowhere to run. Neighbouring nations tighten their borders as thousands try to escape the conflict. The UN warns of a humanitarian catastrophe. The search for survivors. More than 300 killed in the Haiti earthquake. Hundreds more are feared buried in the rubble. And the Lucifer heatwave continues to fuel fires in Spain, forcing thousands to evacuate their homes. We begin with breaking news from Afghanistan. President Ashraf Ghani has fled the country after the Taliban reached the capital, Kabul. Officials from the group have reportedly said there will be no transitional government, with the Taliban expecting a complete handover of power. Well, CGTN's Zamarialai Abbasin is in Kabul. Daniel Khan is across the border in Pakistan's capital, Islamabad, and our correspondent Toby Muse is in Washington in the United States. But first of all, let's come to Zamarialai, who is in Kabul. What's the latest that you're hearing on the ground there?
Hello, Robin, and two of my friends. It's nice being here again. So, first of all, I would just mention former President Ashraf Ghani. He was always saying that if I even beheaded, I won't leave Kabul. I will stand tall and I will keep continuing to secure the republic. Where is he now? You mentioned in your news, and that's the top story from Afghanistan, of course. So he's no more here, and former President Hamid Karzai, High Council for National Reconciliation Chief Dr. Abdullah, and Hizb Islami, the party leader, Gulbuddin Hekmatyar, is here in Kabul, and they are securing the presidential palace. I got news and information from my sources in Kabul, and they told me that some of the Taliban members have reached Kabul and they have entered the presidential palace. So, yet, when I look to the more accurate and precise sources, still need to be confirmed because it's not far from the reality and everybody is waiting to finally make it happen, and it's on the way. But there are reports that they have reached. Secondly, the situation in Afghanistan, as you see, it falls suddenly. You got 2 weeks and all the provinces in Afghanistan fell to the Taliban. Suddenly there were expectation that capital Kabul won't fall that soon to the Taliban because U.S. President Joe Biden sent about 5,000 boots to Kabul to secure their stuff and finally evacuate. Right now, as I'm talking to you, there is no much helicopters in the skies of Kabul, but all day long I was here on the top roof and I was hearing dozens of helicopters and Apaches were here and they were evacuating the embassy. I don't know what were they doing because they carried this, as I counted, more than 8 hours. And still continues somehow, but it decreased. Another part, what's doing Kabul now and how things are being controlled. We got a video message from Kabul Mayor Daoud Sultanzoy, and he told Kabul residential that keep calm, don't panic, everything is in control. And according to him, the Taliban have contacted him and told him to just carry on his position as Kabul mayor and deliver services to the people of Kabul. And at the same time, we got information from the Interior Ministry. They also involved in securing some parts of the city, but the officers and police personnel, they are confused somehow because it was not well planned during Ashraf Ghani, and that's how we are seeing the results. But there are some comments from the Interim Minister of Afghanistan that we would like to invite the audience to listen.
The safety and security of the city is guaranteed. There will be no attack on the city, and there will be a peaceful transfer of power to the transitional government. It's our responsibility to protect with all our force.
So, Zemarilai, this is obviously a fast-moving and developing situation, but just how close are we now to seeing the Taliban take power formally, do you think?
That's a very good question indeed, and everybody is thinking about this, because that was, many believed, even 20 years ago when there was first Bonn conference, many believed that the Taliban excluded from that international and very, very important conference regarding Afghanistan Fed, but the Taliban excluded, and then many believe that, according to the history, according to the evidence, Taliban will re-emerge, and that's how we saw after a couple of months. The first steps that the Taliban took after 2001 was the end of 2001 that proved the Taliban are still on the scene and they have food on the ground. 2003, they increased their efforts, and they were on different provinces, particularly in south of the country, in Kandahar and Helmand, which are their birthplaces, their safe haven. And of course, Taliban emerged from there as Mullah Muhammad Umar Mujahid, raised from there during the civil war in Afghanistan after 1990s. When the Taliban had something to offer to the government, to the international society, to the United States, but unfortunately, I must say, nobody was listening to the Taliban, and then Taliban was accelerating its effort, and they were gaining more jail, they were gaining more prestige, and they were keep going. And their demands were also getting higher, you know. And 2005, then 2010, there were still chances for 40-60, 50-50 in government at the same system, many believe. But the Taliban, as US started during Obama, and the then president Bush, George W. Bush, they were underestimating Taliban, and they said, no, they are not going to give credits to the Taliban as a part of the government and as a part of the leadership of the country. And that's why Taliban came with more offensives, and they finally proved in 2014, after the responsibilities and security grounds were given to the ANDSF, that they have the upper hand. And after that, when Trump came to the leadership of the United States, or his administration tried very hard, even those struggles continued from 2010 during Obama, but there were differences, as I thought. Said. So then President Trump said, we will evacuate, and then now, of course, I will come up now, the conclusion, just 5 seconds, Robin. And now, as we see Taliban, of course, they have very higher demands and the leadership, and they now say, we will decide the fate of the country, who will be where, that's we. And now today, I just hearing news, and I mentioned this, they are appointing the officials all around the country, and particularly in capital Kabul. Robin.
For now, Zemarilai Abasin, thank you very much indeed. We'll come back to get the latest from Kabul later in the programme. Well, let's speak now to Daniel Khan, who is in Pakistan's capital, Islamabad. So, Daniel, what's the reaction been in Pakistan to the developments in Afghanistan?
Well, Robin, the Interior Minister Sheikh Rashid has closed the Torkham border crossing with Afghanistan. Now, this border lies in Pakistan's northwest Khyber agency. This move comes after the Taliban took control of the facility on the other side, and also when the Afghan police surrendered to the Taliban. But we know that Chaman border point in southwest is still open. We also know that Pakistan has built this huge fence all across the 2,600 kilometers between Pakistan and Afghanistan. And last week I was there and spoke to the military personnel, and they said that just 10% of the fencing was left. Now, this was basically this started in 2017 as an effort to prevent drug trafficking, human trafficking. This 2,600 kilometer border between Pakistan and Afghanistan remained quite porous for the last 30 to 40 years, and we know that Pakistan was hosting 4 million Afghan refugees. They were frequently going back and forth into both the countries. So this has been put in place, and since this turmoil began in Afghanistan, the security all across the border has been beefed up, and the rest of the 10% of the border fencing has.
So, Daniel, we're losing our connection to you a little bit. Hopefully you can still hear me, but I wanted to ask you how Pakistan was preparing for the arrival of refugees from Afghanistan.
Yes, Robin, like I said, I visited the Torkham border just last week, and I saw people have started assembling on the Afghan side to enter Pakistan. But Islamabad has already said that it cannot bear any load of new refugees in the wake of the crisis, and has said that it already hosts at least 4 million Afghan refugees, and Pakistan hopes that the international community will step in and will make efforts to facilitate the displaced people inside Afghanistan. I spoke to the information minister as well, Fawad Chaudhry. He said that first of all, Pakistan would want to join hands with the international community and make sure that the camps of the displaced people are made inside Afghanistan. But if it comes to crossing the border, and if there is an influx of these refugees, then they will be accommodated by the just across the border, and special facilities and camps will be made right next to the border. Robin?
For now, Daniel Khan in Islamabad, thank you very much. Turkey, meanwhile, has tightened security at its borders with Iran as the country tries to stop an influx of refugees from Afghanistan. A concrete wall is being built at the border to heighten security. CGTN's Mikhail Bardavid reports.
Many Afghans fleeing the Taliban have been trying to reach Turkey, following recent reports and videos showing hundreds of Afghan refugees crossing into the country from Iran. The Turkish government has been eager to show its increasing security measures. The Defense Minister Hulusi Akar has been inspecting the 295-kilometer border with Iran, where a modular concrete wall is being built. He announced a 64-kilometer section will be completed within the next 5 months. President Recep Tayyip Erdogan also addressed troops on the border via video. He stated he hopes Turkey will be able to completely block every entrance and exit to the country, reinforced by the walls being built on the borders. He says they'll become firewalls and lighten the burden of the armed forces. Turkey has also been carrying out operations to capture refugees and illegal migrants. Istanbul's Migration Authority has announced that over 37,000 irregular migrants have been deported over the past 7 months. It was noted that over 12,000 of those were Afghan nationals. We've been talking to smugglers working near the city here in Van. They've told us that the number of Afghans attempting to make the crossing has declined over the past few days as security is tightened on the border with Iran. I'm Mikhail Bardavid for CGTN in Van, Turkey.
Meanwhile, anger over the United States' withdrawal from Afghanistan is growing. For more, let's bring in Toby Muse from Washington. So, Toby, the United States government is standing by its decision to pull its troops out of Afghanistan.
That's correct. You're really seeing the White House here double down on this decision as we've seen these startling pictures come out of Afghanistan. Joe Biden issued a statement yesterday, but really it's held true for today as well. And it kind of summed up the thinking in the White House. He said in the statement at one point, he said, 1 more year or 5 more years of U.S. military presence would not have made any difference if the Afghan military cannot or will not hold its own country. And an endless American presence in the middle of another country's civil conflict was not acceptable to me. So they really see the White House saying, essentially saying that the White House, the American troops, the American military had done everything it could do, but with an ally that refused to fight, there was just a limit to what the U.S. could do, and there was how much more sense did it make to keep on that presence in that country. Still, Joe Biden did announce the deployment of another 1,000 troops to Afghanistan. That took the total there to 5,000. This was to help with the evacuation of U.S. personnel. Also, they mentioned that the need to maintain vigilance and to monitor Afghanistan in the future for any threat coming out of that country that could also pose a threat to the United States. And also, President Joe Biden made a warning to the Taliban not to attack U.S. personnel as they're leaving that country. And that's certainly a message that was continued today by Secretary of State Antony Blinken.
We've been very clear with the Taliban that any effort on their part to interrupt our operations, to attack our forces, to attack our personnel, would be met with a very strong, decisive response.
But Toby, just last week, US intelligence estimated that Kabul could hold out for at least 3 months. So how could they have got it so wrong?
Really, here in the city of Washington, D.C., the feeling is of shock and surprise at how quickly this has all gone, how collapsed it's gone, how quickly it's all collapsed, especially seeing these images, not only the Taliban advancing across Afghanistan, now walking freely in Kabul, but also the weapons they've seized, the military vehicles. Sometimes those were things that had come from the U.S. military itself. Again, this sense of just what went wrong. Now, some are calling for an accounting to understand how did this happen. Well, will there be a reckoning? Will there be an accounting of the intelligence services or the policies that led to this? Let's remember, over the last 20 years, this has been a bipartisan effort. This has been both the Democratic presidents have overseen the Afghanistan mission and Republican. So it's going to be interesting to see exactly how much accounting really does happen. Now, as to be expected, the allies of the president are standing by him. Nancy Pelosi, the most senior person in the House of Representatives, the majority House Speaker, she said that she supports the president, but she has expressed concern for what will happen to the women of Afghanistan if the Taliban were to take over Afghanistan again. Now, another message we're hearing from the White House and from the government is that this is not Saigon. That's a message you've heard them say. This is not Saigon. And they're referring to those images in 1975 of those helicopters, those U.S. helicopters leaving Saigon, South Vietnam, as they pull out in the face of an advance by the North Vietnamese. Military historians have pointed out, no, you're right, this is not South Vietnam or Saigon, given that South Vietnam was able to hold off the North Vietnamese for 2 years after the end of U.S. direct involvement in that country. The government of Afghanistan seems to have collapsed in the matter of weeks. Now, there are criticisms of Joe Biden. Republican Senator Ben Sasse has called this an unmitigated disaster. He also put out a statement saying history must be clear about this. American troops didn't lose this war. Donald Trump and Joe Biden deliberately decided to lose. Now, this is also another message we're hearing from the White House, that Joe Biden felt himself handcuffed by deals that former President Donald Trump had negotiated while he was in office, and Biden has said he felt he had to stick to those deals. Robin?
So, Toby, looking ahead, would the US and the wider international community recognise a potential new Taliban government?
At the moment, Washington, D.C. is just digesting this from 1 minute to the next. So really, this is an extremely fluid situation, very uncertain. And I think we're going to see a clearer policy emerge in the coming days. As I say, this is a city that is just gobsmacked by the images that are coming in and just really questioning, what was this? What was this 20-year mission that cost the United States blood and treasure? And people are just asking, what has it all been for? Robin?
Toby Muse in Washington for now. Thank you very much. Just a reminder for you that CGTN is available to watch for free on all the major digital platforms, on Smart TV or online on Roku, Apple TV, Amazon Fire and Android TV, YouTube and Dailymotion, CGTN.com and the CGTN app. Still ahead here on The World Today, a desperate scramble to find earthquake survivors as Haiti braces for a tropical storm.
the EU's digital COVID certificate, which offers the promise of unlocking hassle-free travel around Europe this summer.
In less than 2 weeks' time, the Czech border will also open to all EU and Serbian citizens. 4.4 million Hungarians received their first dose of COVID vaccine.
18 and over can receive a COVID-19 vaccination, but it does come with conditions.
Third wave will probably take longer to emerge. This vaccination centre is part of a massive effort to try and drive down the numbers of the new variant that was first identified in India.
Welcome back. A reminder of our top stories. The Afghan president flees the capital as the Taliban reaches Kabul. Fighters have now reportedly entered the presidential palace. And neighbouring nations tighten their borders as thousands try to escape the conflict. The UN warns of a humanitarian catastrophe. Rescuers in Haiti are scrambling to find survivors after Saturday's devastating earthquake. Officials say more than 300 people have been killed and 1,800 injured as buildings collapsed. It's thought many more could still be trapped under the rubble. Michael Voss reports.
A desperate search for survivors is underway following the devastating earthquake, bringing additional hardships to this impoverished Caribbean country. The epicenter of the 7.2 magnitude quake was in the west of the country, about 125 kilometers from the capital, Port-au-Prince. The death toll is in the hundreds, with several thousand injured and many more left homeless.
I was leaving my business normally when I felt the movement while I was walking. I looked in front of me and felt the earth was moving. I saw that everything was falling. When I got home, I realized the extent of the damage.
This hotel in Lake Kai, one of the worst-hit cities, had more guests than usual due to a religious festival. Rescue workers pushed crowds back as they struggled to retrieve the body of a 7-year-old girl. Her mother left distraught. Rescue efforts are hampered by landslides, which have blocked the roads to Lake Kai and another badly hit town, Jeremy, where thousands took to the streets for fear of further aftershocks. Churches, businesses and homes have all been damaged. The government's declared a month-long state of emergency in all the affected areas in a bid to reach victims and get aid in.
We have declared a state of emergency in the west, the south, Nippes and the province of Gans. We have a medical emergency. The health ministry started the distribution of medicines in hospitals.
Hospitals in the region are said to be overflowing with casualties and running short of medical supplies. One former senator hired a private plane to transport some of the victims in need of medical treatment to hospitals elsewhere in the country. This latest disaster comes with Haiti still struggling to recover from the devastating earthquake in 2010, which killed more than 200,000 people and left more than 1 million homeless.
Well, for more on this story, Michael Voss joins us in the studio. So, Michael, this disaster has hit a country that's not only still trying to recover from that earthquake that you mentioned, but also dealing with a political crisis. So how is that going to affect the recovery effort?
Well, you're right, Robin. It's still recovering from that earthquake back in 2010, 11 years ago. In fact, that earthquake was weaker than the current one, but its epicenter was much closer to the capital, the densely populated capital. Hence, the death toll there was 200,000, leaving more than 1 million homeless. I was there shortly afterwards, and it was heartbreaking to see the level of destruction and the amount of people living in shelters and tent camps. Now, billions of dollars have poured into Haiti over the years. And it still, as we say, hasn't recovered. A lot of questions are being asked about corruption and just where did all that money go? President Biden has said he will help Haiti, and he's announced that Samantha Power will lead the effort. That's a very positive sign. She's a heavy hitter former ambassador to the United Nations and now head of the International Development Agency. But she's going to have to deal with a country that's in political turmoil and a very weak government following the assassination last month of the president, Jovenel Moïse. The investigation's still underway. We still don't know who was really behind that, what their motives were, and the investigation actually seems to be stalled.
And another challenge on the horizon, because the recovery effort is in something of a race against time with a tropical storm due in the coming days.
Tropical Storm Grace, and this is a country which is least prepared to handle natural disasters. It's the poorest country in the Americas. I've contacted the National Hurricane Center in the United States. They say Grace is due to land in Haiti Monday evening, and it's due to hit that same southwestern part of the country where the earthquake is. Now, it is a tropical storm. It doesn't look like it's going to get up to a hurricane, but with high winds, heavy rain and storm surges, this is the last thing Haiti needs right now.
Absolutely. Michael Voss, thank you. Well, let's take a brief look now at some other news from around the world. Angry residents have set fire to the home of a fuel tank owner after a blast killed at least 28 people in Lebanon. It had reportedly been seized by the army, and gasoline was being handed out to residents when the explosion occurred. Dozens of people were injured, including military and security forces personnel. It's not clear what triggered the blast. Thousands of farmers in India drove a convoy of tractors through northern Haryana state on Independence Day to continue their protest against the government's new agriculture laws. They've been camped out on New Delhi's outskirts for more than 7 months, urging Prime Minister Narendra Modi to repeal the laws, which they say threaten their livelihoods. Canada's Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has announced a snap election for next month. He's seeking a new mandate to steer the nation out of the coronavirus pandemic. The ruling Liberals acknowledge an election now is a gamble, given recent opinion polls suggest the party isn't guaranteed a majority. The heat wave and strong winds are fueling huge wildfires in Spain, with temperatures as high as 40 degrees. Hundreds of residents in the province of Avila were forced to evacuate their homes as flames approached. Crews are also battling another blaze near Valencia, working through the night to bring it under control. Hundreds of military officers have been deployed to help the effort. In Japan, torrential rain has caused a mudslide and further floods, killing at least 3 people. 4 others are said to be missing. The extreme weather forced the country to issue its highest level alert, urging nearly 2 million people to leave their homes. In some areas, total rainfall since Wednesday has been more than triple the average for the month of August. More wet weather is expected over the next few days. Much of the US West Coast is suffering from historic drought, with some cities and towns struggling to supply enough water for homes and businesses. Our correspondent Mark New travelled to Mendocino in California to see the situation firsthand.
It's a town right next to the Pacific Ocean and a town famous for having water tower after water tower. But the vast majority of those storage structures were converted to business facilities decades ago. So now the town finds itself treasuring every drop.
2-minute showers, wash your hair once a week.
It's one of the most historic droughts we've seen since 76, 77.
Superintendent Ryan Rhodes manages the community's groundwater, which is not an easy task since there's no centralized municipal water system. Demand is usually met by 420 privately owned wells, many of which are now drying up.
This residence here recently submitted an application to drill a replacement well, citing water problems and a lack of water in their old shallow hand-dug well. This residence right here on the corner recently reported not only having a dry well and having to purchase water, she claimed she's showering only 1 time per week.
Many businesses are scrambling and even shortening hours.
We were running water to fill up our sinks inside, and rather than just letting it go down the drain, we captured it in a bucket, and I watered all the plants out here this morning.
Patterson's Pub has put a 3% water fee on customer bills to help cover extra costs, including doubling their storage capacity with an 11,000-liter tank, about 3,000 gallons, which gets purified with this device called an ozonator.
Fortunately, many years ago, drilled a very deep well, and and it's held up so far, but all of my neighbors are dried up, so they have no water.
The supermarket next door has brought in porta potties to save water. In the parking lot, we also find a local resident working for the company GoSun, which sells machines that produce water by capturing it from the moisture in the air. Another sign of the droughts are the dry, parched soccer fields at local schools. It just doesn't make sense to continue to water these grounds when so much water is needed to meet the demands of the community. The local high school is selling some of its water reserves to the community at rates Rhodes says are practically like giving it away. That's a far cry from the hefty prices many residents are having to pay for private deliveries from out of town.
Here you go, your water delivery guy. We see these trucks rolling through town every day, multiple times a day. We need immediate action, and we need solutions right away. And all ideas are still on the table. We're still discussing desal, large-scale dehumidifiers, drilling new wells, looking at surface water sources, water by rail coming from Willits, water by barge from the Bay Area, even the proposed idea of a CAL FIRE training where the helicopters come in and scoop waters out of local ponds.
Rhodes says reducing the cost and distance of truck transports currently offers the most hope, though he says in the long run, it's about addressing global climate change and making better use out of the precious water they have. Mark New, CGTN, Mendocino, California.
Still ahead here on The World Today, reports that the Taliban has reached the presidential palace in Kabul after the Afghan president leaves the country. We're live there next.
Hello, I'm Stephen Cole at CGTN's European headquarters in London.
My international guests help me help you set your agenda.
A well-looked-after body will make the brain happy.
That is the evidence.
We want to share the benefits of China development.
This story is far from finished. Join me on the agenda at these times every week.
There is no more they, or you, or me. In today's economic landscape, there is only we. An interconnected world of business, trade, and investment. Daily coverage told simply, with insight and new perspectives. Global business. We've got the world covered.
Welcome back to The World Today. Our top stories. The Afghan president flees the capital as the Taliban reaches Kabul. Fighters have now reportedly entered the presidential palace. And neighbouring nations tighten their borders as thousands try to escape the conflict. The UN warns of a humanitarian catastrophe. Well, let's go live now to Kabul, where the US Embassy has warned of worsening security and gunfire at the airport. Samariulai Abbasin is in the Afghan capital for us. So, again, a fluid situation there. What's the latest you're hearing?
Robin, hello again. We got a lot of reactions, and as we see that foreign embassies and international organizations are evacuating Afghanistan, most of them, almost 99.1 of them, I can say, have left the country and flee Kabul. I just saw a tweet from French Ambassador David Martinin, with whom I had an interview just 2 weeks ago, and he was still hopeful. He was talking about the continuation of President Ghani government in Afghanistan. As the president flee after those all attacks that have been happening all around the country, he tweeted that he is leaving former green zone. The green zone was an expression used in Kabul central area, where Wazir Akbar Khan, the presidential palace, U.S. embassy, French embassy, Britain embassy, and every other embassies were located. It's a diplomatic place. So he said former green zone. Another angle, we got a reaction from the defense minister of Afghanistan, Bismillah Mohammadi. He said that Ghani has solved the country, and he tied our hands from behind and done on Ghani. These are his words. The defense minister is talking about former President Ashraf Ghani. And anger sparkling all around the country towards Ashraf Ghani, who fled the country. So reactions are deteriorating, and when we come to the young girls, educated, one of them is Karimi. She has Farishta Karimi written. She is advocating and also managing a small NGO named Charmas, and she was trying to help kids educated. She said there is still hope. And today we had our hard day, but we are going through to the peace. And if we are seeing today the conditions are going towards peace and hopes are again raising, she says, yes, peace is possible. So these are the reactions, for example, I told you from three different sides.
So President Ashraf Ghani has left the country. We're hearing reports that the Taliban has reached the presidential palace. So how close are we, do you think, to seeing the Taliban take power?
I just got reports from Doha, Qatar, and there were the information that were concluding the issue is Mullah Abdul Ghani Baradar, the deputy chief of Taliban's political office, is leading towards Afghanistan, and he is expected to reach soon to Kabul. But yet, the final decision is going to be made on this regard. There is another consul in Kabul, former President Hamid Karzai, Hizb Islami leader Gulbuddin Hekmatyar, as I said before, and of course Dr. Abdullah is leading this council, and they're arranging things. Some believe that they are getting prepared to welcome Taliban leadership to Kabul, but the main question is, everybody was talking about the Taliban, that their Islamic Emirat won't be accepted, and the Troika Plus meetings also concluded as a joint statement that they won't accept this. But we got report from Pakistan, and the Pakistan said that they will recognize this government and they are ready to do this. And Pakistan was one of those fewer governments that recognized Taliban government back before 2001, before it collapses. So these are the changing scenarios, and at the same level, we see that the officials now in Kabul are led by the Taliban. They are guided by the Taliban through various paths and communication directions. For example, Kabul mayor, he said that the Taliban has made him satisfied to continue his job as mayor in Kabul. And at the same time, Interior Minister seems like to be working together with Taliban tonight. These are so new, these are so dramatic, and of course, and somehow there were reaction in Afghanistan social media. Of course, social media is still available in the country. They say that things are totally changing, and when we were afraid of a collapse that militarily, and now we think things are totally different. And the reason some put that Taliban members are not that much, and Kabul is a city of more than 6 million. So Taliban may need to work with current officials, current structures, the police, the NDSF and others, but there might be some changes that, of course, Taliban will have in their case studies.
And Zamari, we appreciate that it's difficult to pin some of this information down, but when it comes to those reports of the Taliban entering the presidential palace, what are you hearing about that? Can you confirm that for us?
Yeah, I'm just waiting, and I'm in contact with different parts in the country from the people who are around, involved in this scenario. So the problem is everybody's busy, even their media offices, and they are just keeping it a secret because there might be settlements, there might be things. But many believe, yes, there are fewer members of the Taliban. Who are they? Yet not clear. They have really entered to the presidential palace. That's what I'm waiting to be confirmed, Robin.
Okay, Zamari Abbasin in Kabul, thanks very much indeed for talking to us. Thousands of refugees have been trying to cross the borders into neighbouring nations. Let's talk now to Daniel Khan, who joins us from the Pakistani capital, Islamabad. So, Daniel, what's the reaction been where you are to the developments in Afghanistan?
Well, Robin, Pakistan has said it is closely following the unfolding situation and the developments in Afghanistan and would continue to support the efforts for a political settlement. Pakistan also hopes all Afghan sides will work together to resolve this internal political crisis. The Foreign Office just came out with a statement which says that Pakistan Embassy in Kabul is extending necessary assistance to Pakistanis, the Afghans and the diplomatic and international community for consular work and coordination with the Pakistan International Airlines. And Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi has also said that Pakistan had repeatedly emphasized that Afghanistan's problems have no military solution, and the world and Pakistan are on the same page, and that the Afghan issue should be resolved through talks and negotiations, and a transitional setup should emerge in a peaceful way which is inclusive and broad-based. This is what the Foreign Minister of Pakistan has said. Robin?
And Pakistan expecting an influx of refugees coming from Afghanistan. What's happening with the borders between the two countries?
Well, at the moment, we know that the Torkham border in the northwest Khyber agency has been closed by the authorities, and the Interior Minister, Mr. Sheikh Rashid, has said that the police on the other side, they have surrendered, and it is just a precaution, and because the facility on the other side of the Torkham border has been taken over by the Taliban. But the people on the Afghan side, they are gathering there. That crowd is gaining momentum, and there we are expecting an influx. But at the same time, Pakistan has also beefed up the security all across the border. We know that the Chaman border security has been tightened, as well as Torkham and the Ghulam Khan, and also at Parachanar border posts. But yes, like you said, Pakistan is expecting a large number of refugees, and for that, the Information Minister, Mr. Fawad Chaudhry, has said that if there is a large number that comes in, they will not be allowed inside Pakistan without being checked, and their ID cards will be checked, which as well as refugee cards will be checked, and then they will be given next near the border of Afghanistan and Pakistan, and they will not be allowed to go inside the country. Robin?
Daniel Khan in Islamabad, thank you very much indeed. Anger over the US withdrawal is growing globally. Let's talk now to Toby Muse, who's in Washington for us. So, Toby, nevertheless, the United States government standing by its decision to pull its troops out of Afghanistan.
Indeed, that's the message we're hearing from the White House today and yesterday. This whole weekend, we've been hearing that the White House saying this was the correct decision. And I think it's summed up in the statement Joe Biden gave. This was yesterday, but the message still stands today. He wrote in the statement, 1 more year or 5 more years of U.S. military presence would not have made a difference if the Afghan military cannot or will not hold its own country. That's what we're hearing today from people here in Washington, D.C., that the U.S. had tried its best, but it had a kind of unreliable partner in the form of the Afghanistan government and the military there, that just when it came down to it was not prepared to stand and fight. This weekend, we know Joe Biden did send an additional 1,000 troops to be deployed to Afghanistan, U.S. troops. That takes it to 5,000 to really oversee, the evacuation of U.S. personnel from the country. He also warned the Taliban, saying that they would that any attack on U.S. personnel would be met with a swift and strong U.S. military response. And we also have the White House pushing the line that President Joe Biden's hands were tied because of former deals made by former President Donald Trump in those ongoing negotiations with the Taliban throughout much of last year. The White House said that it found itself handcuffed to the agreements that the president had made last year. Robin?
And Toby, even a week ago, US intelligence thought that Kabul could hold out for at least 3 months. Questions must be being asked now about how they could have misjudged it so.
If I had to describe the reaction here over the past few days, has just been shock, surprise. Just Washington, D.C. cannot believe how quickly the Afghanistan government of Afghanistan has collapsed, how fast the Taliban has advanced, especially when you're seeing these images of the Taliban capturing weapons and military vehicles at times donated by the US military. So it has this sense of what are we watching, what has happened. Now, obviously, there is this desire from some quarters for some sort of accounting. How did this all go so wrong? But how far will that push for an accounting be, given the Afghanistan mission has been a very bipartisan mission over the past 2 years, 20 years, sorry. You had President George W. Bush, then you had 8 years of President Barack Obama, 4 years of President Donald Trump. So really, everyone's kind of been involved in this mission over the past 20 years. Now, the allies of the president are very supportive of President Joe Biden's actions to withdraw the troops, but even they have been expressing concerns. So take Majority House Leader Nancy Pelosi, one of the most powerful people in this country. She said, yes, she supports President Joe Biden's decision, but she's expressed concern. What will happen to the women of Afghanistan if the Taliban take over? So those are these kind of unsettling questions that are going around. Then we have some people who are just blasting the government, saying this has been absolutely mishandled. So take Republican Senator Ben Sasse. Now, he was a frequent critic of former President Donald Trump, so he's seen really as a moderate Republican. He is calling this an unmitigated disaster, and he put out a statement saying, history must be clear about this. American troops didn't lose this war. Donald Trump and Joe Biden deliberately decided to lose. So that's the kind of rhetoric we're starting to hear. And I think these questions are going to grow in the coming days, just asking, how did this all go so wrong and so quickly after 20 years of US blood and treasure invested in the country? Robin?
Toby News in Washington, thank you very much. China's State Councillor and Foreign Minister Wang Yi met the head of the Afghan Taliban Political Commission, Mullah Abdul Ghani Baradar, on July the 28th in Tianjin. He stressed that China, as Afghanistan's largest neighbour, has always respected the country's sovereignty, independence and territorial integrity. Wang Yi says the hasty withdrawal of the United States and NATO troops marks the failure of the United States policy on Afghanistan. He pointed out that the Taliban is an important military and political force in the country and is expected to play a big role in the peace process. China hopes that the Taliban will put the interests of the nation first. Still ahead here on The World Today, we meet the Serbian scientists who've joined forces with their Chinese counterparts to research the effects of climate change.
Hello, I'm Stephen Cole. What's on your agenda this week? I know when it comes to news, you're sport for choice. So many channels, so many opinions. But it's time to step off the news roundabout, time to cut out the noise, get to the heart of the real story with a talk show with a difference. I'll be finding out what the world is thinking by talking to the global decision makers and helping you set your own news agenda. Remember, we don't just report the news, we set the agenda.
The world's currencies are more connected than ever before. The mechanisms that drive the economy are universal. Money moves markets. We explain these trends and show you how the cash in your pocket can have a wide-reaching effect. Because money makes the world go round. Global business.
Each day, there are millions of stories. Each one can open new perspectives, new possibilities. Wherever you look, we are there. To see, discover, explore. We put the pieces together to find what really matters to you, all around the world, all around the clock. Our reporters are at home across the globe. From our headquarters in Beijing and production centers in Washington, Nairobi, and London, China Global Television Network. Stories from across the globe, reaching people across the globe. CGTN. See the difference.
Welcome back. Let's return now to our main story, the escalating situation in Afghanistan. In the last few minutes, the UK Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, has been speaking. He says he does not want the world to prematurely recognise a new government in Kabul.
I think it's fair to say that the US decision to pull out has accelerated things, but this has been in many ways something that has been a chronicle of an event foretold. We've known for a long time that this was the way things were going, and as I said before, this is a mission whose military component really ended for the UK in 2014. What we're dealing with now is the very likely advent of a new regime in Kabul. We don't know exactly what kind of a regime that will be. What we want to do is make sure that we as the UK pull together our international partners, our like-minded partners, so that we deal with that regime in a concerted way.
Well, let's take a brief look now at some other news from around the world. Angry residents have set fire to the home of a fuel tank owner after a blast killed at least 28 people in Lebanon. It had reportedly been seized by the army, and gasoline was being handed out to residents when the explosion occurred. Dozens of people were injured, including military and security forces personnel. It's not clear what triggered the blast. Thousands of farmers in India drove a convoy of tractors through northern Haryana state on Independence Day to continue their protest against the government's new agriculture laws. They've been camped out on New Delhi's outskirts for more than 7 months, urging Prime Minister Narendra Modi to repeal the laws, which they say threaten their livelihoods. Canada's Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has announced a snap election for next month. He's seeking a new mandate to steer the nation out of the coronavirus pandemic. The ruling Liberals acknowledge an election now is a gamble, given recent opinion polls suggest the party isn't guaranteed a majority. A heatwave and strong winds are fueling huge wildfires in Spain, with temperatures as high as 40 degrees. Hundreds of residents in the province of Avila were forced to evacuate their homes as flames approached. Crews are also battling another blaze near Valencia, working through the night to bring it under control. Hundreds of military officers have been deployed to help the effort. In Japan, torrential rain has caused a mudslide and further floods, killing at least 3 people. 4 others are said to be missing. The extreme weather forced the country to issue its highest level alert, urging nearly 2 million people to leave their homes. In some areas, total rainfall since Wednesday has been more than triple the average for the month of August. More wet weather is expected over the next few days. Serbian scientists have joined forces with Chinese colleagues to research the effects of climate change. Belgrade's leading biolab has become the latest to collaborate with China, joining over 50 similar scientific partnerships worldwide. CGTN's Alyosha Milenkovic reports.
Inside these glass vessels, local plants are grown under artificial light and in various conditions in Serbia's leading biological institution. Rapidly changing world climate affects all plant species, and here the scientists test various temperatures and drought conditions to find the survival limits for each plant. Scientists at Siniša Stanković Biological Institute have been carrying out research for 75 years. Now, for the first time, they've embarked on a joint venture, working alongside Chinese colleagues and sharing their findings with a lab in Shanghai.
The idea originated from the Chinese president, Xi Jinping. There are many similar labs worldwide, but this one is the first in the Balkans. Before the lab opened, we had an extraordinary collaboration with my Chinese colleagues from the Shanghai Institute of Materia Medica.
We have seen how they grow and monitor the plants in a controlled environment. But this is where everything starts. At the places like this, Tsarska Bara, or the Emperor's Swamp. Here is where scientists come to collect the plants and take them to the lab. Today's expedition is to hunt for this plant and its fruits. Its Latin name is Solanum dulcamara, a distant relative of the tomatoes and potatoes we eat today. The team carefully picks the ripe fruits, flowers, and leaves. Some of these specimens will end up as a new plants in the Belgrade lab, and some will find their way to Shanghai for further research.
For 20 years we are traveling all around the Balkan Peninsula, not only Serbia but also other countries, and we collect many plants like medicinal plants that are used also in traditional medicine but also in modern medicine, like in the treatment of some illnesses.
The Chinese and the Serbian scientists hope their collaboration will not only gain insights into the effects of global warming, but also potentially lead to breakthroughs in treatment for illnesses such as cancer, diabetes, and bacterial infections. Aljoša Milenković, CGTN, Carska Bara.
A reminder now of our main story, the developing situation in Afghanistan. The country's president has fled the capital after the Taliban reached Kabul. Fighters have reportedly entered the presidential palace, and there are reports that the Taliban has now ordered its members to advance on the city. The US Embassy is warning of worsening security, with gunfire being heard around the airport. NATO says it's working to keep the airport open and will facilitate and coordinate evacuations. Well, that's it for The World Today. Thanks for watching. We're available on smart TV apps such as Roku, Apple TV, Amazon Fire and Android TV, YouTube and Dailymotion, CGTN.com and the CGTN app. And from all the team here in London, goodbye.